board training
Everybody here?
for the legislative update that you're required to get after every session. Ron Garcia did this portion of the session last week on September the 12th live. And we had some technical difficulties, meaning user error by me, that did not allow the session to record. Ron's graciously agreed to come back and record that today so that we can get this link out to you. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Ron and let him get through his presentation. Thanks again, Ron.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay, Wayne? Everything's good? Okay, great. Okay, well, guys, it was my pleasure giving this presentation on the 12th, and it is today as well. And so we're grateful to the Service Center to provide. I know it's required, but we're grateful that the Service Center provides this to our school districts and to our board members, and so we appreciate the fact that since we did it on the 12th, we've actually had some positive feedback in terms of, man, I didn't know that was a law, and so that's why these presentations are important and required, because the smoke, it's going to be a while before the smoke clears on exactly what the legislature has done in terms of passing laws this legislative session. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it. As we have discussed, as we mentioned a second ago, this is the 88th legislative update. And so just to point out a few of the areas of the law that we're going to talk about in terms of bills that have taken place is going to be personnel.
Another hour of his life.
The personnel and student issues, accountability, instruction, and library material. We're going to cover some governance stuff and some finance, and then some safety and security issues. And so, in the regular session, okay, because we're going to talk about the other sessions here in a second, but in the regular session, the Texas legislature, which began in January 10th and it adjourned on May 29th, that was the regular session. In that session, there were a total of just over 8,000 bills from the House and the Senate that were filed. Okay, out of those over 8,000 bills, a little less than 1,250 passed, and there were 76 that were vetoed by the government, meaning he struck those down by his power of veto. And so that's a lot of bills that are filed, but it's even a lot that were passed. And so thankfully, we're not going to talk about all 1,250 of those today, because we don't have the time to do that. And so, but what we are going to do is we're going to talk about a handful of bills that we think are very, very pertinent and relevant to you as school districts and particularly as board members. Okay. So after the first session, the governor called, as he has the power to do, he called a first special session. Okay. The first lasted 30 days. And essentially ended, as the screen there says, ended quietly on June 27th, with really no laws being made, and still in a deadlock. This is not on the screen, but the governor's main objectives with this second session, there it is that that's the second session. But in the first session, there was. These two things were on his radar, which is tax reduction and franchise tax exemptions. And so after the first special session, he quickly called the second special session, which focused on property taxes. Okay, so Senate Bill 2 was an $8 billion property tax reduction, and it provided homestead exemptions of $100,000. For school district property tax bills, and then SB 3 essentially doubled the franchise tax exemption. And so now, almost 70,000 Texas businesses will no longer pay franchise tax because of the amount of revenue that they make. And so it's under a cap that's required in order to have to pay franchise taxes now. And so not a lot more happened in that special session number 2. Now, there will be, the information that we have tells us that there is going to be another special session, a third special session, plus, as I call there. And this is going to be an education special session, and our understanding is that this is supposed to take place this fall in October. And so we will see what that special session brings. And so let's talk real quick about some of the bills. And I think this is important because, when we're hearing about bills at the start of the regular session, some of these bills get a lot of traction and they start getting spoken about and they get on people's radars. And because of that, when these particular bills do not pass or die, I think it's important for us to talk about these and say, okay, this didn't end up becoming a law. Like the first one that you see there, or the first two that you see there regarding SB 8 and HB 100. These two bills were essentially your school voucher bills in the regular session. SB 8 was the creation of education savings accounts, and this was going to be a measure to allow parents to use state money to fund education savings accounts, which is supposed to help pay for private school tuition. And again, to put it in their terms, it's also it's all about school choice in terms of these bills that they push. And SB 117, which also deserves kind of a mention, that also died, which would have established the Texas Parental Empowerment Program and Premium Tax Credit. That was also kind of a companion bill to SB 8. The other one that was relevant to those two was an increase in school funding in order to fund those education savings accounts that didn't end up taking place. But as you can see there, that was supposed to add $4.5 billion to state funding in order to fund that, including raising teacher pay. Okay, but the bill failed because lawmakers could not reach a deal before the deadline, and that's unfortunately more common than not. And so HB 2744 was also another one that did not pass, and this is relevant, I think, to schools because in light of the unfortunate tragedy that took place in Uvalde, one of the many proposed safety and security measures or bills that was pushed was to raise the age of to be able to purchase semi-automatic rifles in Texas. And they attempted to raise that from the age of 18 to 21. That did not pass. Okay, another couple of bills related to safety and security and gun crimes, if you will, are SB 23 and HB 4843. This one was regarding raising the minimum sentence for gun crimes. These bills would have raised the minimum sentence for many felony crimes involving firearms to 10 years, whereas before they were 5 years or less, depending on the crime. So HB 770, related to salary and wages paid to public school employees, and making an appropriation for that. There was a big push for increasing pay and teacher raises and so forth. That one did not pass. Okay. There was also another one. You see, a lot of these. I'll stop by interjecting this fact. As long as I have been following legislation in the state of Texas as a school lawyer, you tend to see themes in in what the legislature or legislators are trying to do in the legislature for that session. This particular session was very much on the safety and security side, so there was a lot of bills that were filed regarding safety and security. And so we're going to talk about some of those. You've seen a few of those here that didn't pass as well. And so that was one of the themes. The other theme was regarding pay and salaries and those types of things as well. That was another kind of a minor theme. But anyway, moving on. So HB 99, this one related to the establishment of minimum wage for school bus drivers. That did not pass. I'm not sure what your particular school district pays bus drivers, but this particular bill would have increased that minimum wage to $15 an hour. Your school may pay more than that, or less. I'm not sure, but that's what it would have done essentially. Another bill, HB 706, would have made it a requirement. Again, this is one of those safety and security measures, right? This would have made it a requirement to use metal detectors at every campus in the state of Texas. That it would be as expensive as it sounds probably, and just not generally desired. And so that bill did not have the traction that people thought it would, and so it did not pass. Okay, HB 772. As again, I'll kind of repeat this. As long as I have been following legislative sessions in my attorney career here, there is always a bill that proposes to abolish corporal punishment in the schoolhouse. This session is no different. HB 772 there was a bill submitted to do away with corporal punishment, and the bill did not pass. And so we still have corporal punishment. It'll continue to be attempted to be abolished, I'm sure, in future years. But to this point, it's still the case. Now, I will say, I'll just interject this fact, many schools, just because of recent case law and things that have happened to educators, even when they did everything right in terms of corporal punishment, many schools just don't do it, just because it probably doesn't make sense when it comes to the risk of their certificates and other things. And so that's an unfortunate reality, but that's the case. So HB 631 and HB 1155, this related to, and this is one of those that had a lot of support behind it, but the bills relating to parental rights in public education, prohibiting instruction regarding sexual orientation and gender identity, these did not pass. Okay, HB SB 1154 and 1256. These are related to a couple of duties that they were going to put on education service centers. One being that they be advisory committees with respect to health coverage, and then a committee to evaluate teacher shortages. And so those bills did not pass. And then last but not least, there was a bill introduced to require school buses to be electric and to have solar panels, and that one did not pass. Okay, and so for the rest of our time here, what we are going to talk about is a handful of bills that were passed and that are affecting public education. And so, like I said, remember, there were 1,246 bills passed, okay, in the regular session. We're probably going to discuss about 20 or so. And so if you think about it, and that's less than 2% of the new laws, right? But, we are limited in time, and so that's what we're going to do. Before I start going through these bills, we're going to start with personnel. I did want to demonstrate something to you all. Hopefully that I do this right. And so there is my presentation. You should now be seeing on my screen something on the website here. I just wanted to, before I forget to do this, I just wanted to show you all if there's any bill that we talk about today or other bills that we don't talk about. Maybe you've heard of a bill and you say, well, Mr. Garcia did not talk about that particular bill. Then I want to show you how you can look at other bills. Okay, so for example, we're about to talk about HB 63. Okay, and so what you do here, and you see this has to be correct here. So the way I like to look at it is you just do bill lookup, and you would do HB 63, type that in up there, make sure this says regular, because remember, see here, it's got 88.1, that means the first special session, 88.2 means the second special session, so I'm going to keep it here, I'm going to press submit, and then if you see here, it pulls up every single thing about this bill, from the date that it was filed, to the first time read, to all this stuff where it passed and was voted on, and second readings and third readings and all this stuff sent to the governor on the 24th, signed by the governor, and made effective September 1st, okay? And so the other thing that it does up here, as you see here, and you can click on these tabs, it shows you the authors and co-authors, any companion bills that might be there, and then the text. So this is where you would go in case you want to see there's some analysis, fiscal notes. There's a bill analysis that you can look up there. Let's see here. Bar's in the way up there. And then if you actually want to look at the bill itself, this here, see, this is the introduced version, the engrossed version, so you don't want to look at these. These are not final. The final one is this one that says engrossed, and so you would click on that, and it's going to give you the actual bill, all the underlined part of that. So this bill is affecting the one that we're going to talk about, HB 63. It's affecting the family code, and so it gives you the law there and shows you how this bill modifies this law. If it's underlined, that's new language. If it's crossed out, that means the bill crosses out that word or words in what the law used to be. And so this is what the bill looks like. And so anyway, I just wanted to point out that is how you are able to look up bills that we talk about in case you want to see the bill's language and want more information. And like I said, you could do that for any other bills that we're going to talk about. We're also going to talk about HB 3, and so same thing, right? You just look it up, look at the text, and you're able to look at how the bill changes a law or what new sections it creates. Okay, just thought that was important. That's a little bit of a teaching you guys to fish as opposed to giving y'all a fish. But anyhow, let's move on. Okay, and actually start talking about some bills. So HB 63 is a bill. This one's related to child abuse or neglect, reports of child abuse or neglect, and investigation regarding those. And so your educators at your school, this is not new to them in terms of being required to make reports to CPS for child abuse or neglect. However, there's been some change to the rules. Now, these are significant because they're very different than what your teachers and administrators are used to, okay? HB 63 adds to the information that an individual is required to include when making a report of abuse or neglect and to identify. And so they have to now put all of the facts and sources of why they suspect the abuse or neglect, and they have to put, this is a huge change, they have to report their name, their phone number, and their address. It used to be that reports to CPS were anonymous, and you didn't have to put that information. Now, they're not anonymous reports. You cannot make anonymous reports anymore. Those are not accepted. You can make reports over the phone if you can get through to somebody, but those reports are recorded, and they're also not anonymous because you're being asked who you are, what your information is, and so forth and so on. Now, it does emphasize, though, that anonymous reports can still be made to law enforcement. However, making that anonymous report to law enforcement is not going to satisfy the employee's reporting requirement. And so, very, very important. Oftentimes, when something happens involving the potential abuse or neglect of a child, our educators are making reports to both law enforcement and CPS. And so now, you just, there's just a difference in terms of how they make the report to CPS. Okay, moving on to HB 1789. This one's regarding employing bus drivers. So it used to be the case that that bus driver, that you could only hire if you had a bus driver that was in a prohibited level of relationship with a board member, that you could only hire that person to be a bus driver if you lived in a county of less than 35,000 people in population. Now, that's not the case. HB 1789 allows school boards to appoint or employ bus drivers, and it does not run afoul with the nepotism laws any longer. HB 2012, this one has to do with the display of the national motto in public school, and this particular bill specifies that a classroom teacher at a public elementary or secondary school cannot be prohibited from displaying in a classroom a poster or framed copy of the national motto. And the national motto, if we don't know, it's "In God We Trust." So now there's specific requirements of how big can it be, and so forth, and whether it can have any other writings on it and that kind of thing. And so there's some rules with that, but if they want to display that in their classroom, we're not able to prohibit them from doing that. So while there were not bills that provided for teacher pay raises for current teachers, there was a bill, HB 10, that did provide a one-time cost of living adjustment for retired educators and a one-time 13th check for certain retired educators, okay? And so this bill would require TRS to make an additional one-time cost of living adjustment payable to those annuitants receiving a monthly death or retirement benefit annuity. In terms of the eligibility, the devil's in the details with that, but that's something that was passed, okay? The SB 763, this was one of those bills that was signed by the governor, and these are one of the types of bills that we see during the session that might raise some eyebrows and might raise concerns. And we're talking about SB 763 that allows school districts to employ or allow volunteer chaplains to perform the duties of a school counselor. And you might say, well, Ron, what are the concerns with that? Well, when a Texas bill catches national attention and statewide attention, it's something to think about. And so the Texas Tribune has published something about that, and one of the things about it is that it does indicate that there is no there's no state certification required for that, and so you have the Texas Tribune creating a publication titled "Unlicensed Religious Chaplains May Counsel Students in Texas Public Schools." This was also something that was reported on by CNN. It was also something that was reported on by USA Today, and again, these are national media outlets. It was also reported by Houston Public Media. This one actually mentions that more than 100 chaplains opposed this new school chaplain law. And so, again, you could go on and read those articles just to kind of see what they say, but that's what's happened. Okay, the other kind of more notable, for at least for lawyers and for you guys to pay attention to, it are the letters that school districts are receiving from entities such as the American Civil Liberties Union, the Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the Freedom from Religion Foundation. These entities joined forces and provided these letters to school administrators or school districts in Texas, essentially telling them, hey, we know about this law that was passed, and we urge you to vote against adopting this chaplain policy. We're going to monitor the implementation of this legislation across Texas, and we're going to take action that's necessary and appropriate to protect the rights of Texas children and their parents who practice a wide array of faiths or none at all. So essentially, they're saying that that their concern, I guess, is that this will lead to religious type suggestions or proselytizing to students from this chaplain who's supposed to be a counselor. And so, again, just interesting that one might need to be on your radar there. Okay, let's talk about some bills related to students. HB 114 reorganizes the statutes pertaining to the removal of students from class and placement in DAP, okay, for a student who possesses, uses, or is under the influence of marijuana on or within 300 feet of property while attending school activity. Essentially, what HB 114 does is it makes e-cigarettes related, or a vape, in other words, it makes offenses related to vapes and e-cigarettes a mandatory placement in the DAP. This was not the case before this legislative session. My understanding is that carrying vapes or e-cigarettes was considered misconduct, and it was spelled out in the student code of conduct as an offense. But most schools took care of that with ISS. That is not the law anymore. The law is it's a mandatory placement in DAP. Okay. Now, marijuana and THC related offenses continue to be mandatory DAP. There's no longer mandatory expulsion, however, for felony marijuana, THC, and alcohol. Okay. One of the things that this causes, one of the many concerns, I guess, is issues with capacity within the DAP program. Many schools have their DAP looks different. And some school districts may have an entire campus, an entire building that's dedicated to DAP, while other schools may have a classroom within their one building. Okay, that counts as DAP. And then another classroom, because you can't have, primary and secondary students together, and so sometimes schools have to have two rooms or two separate locations that are DAP. But the concern is the unfortunate reality of schools dealing with so many kids having vapes at school. There's a concern that, man, we're going to start sending kids to DAP for vapes left and right. Well, the legislature, I don't know that it's a it's a perfect response to an acknowledgement, but it looks like they have at least acknowledged that might be an issue. And so within the law, they wrote into the law that if DAP is at capacity, and at the time that the campus behavior coordinator is deciding the placement for that student who engaged in those types of violations, okay, marijuana, e-cigarettes, alcohol, those types of things, that the student shall be placed in ISS. And then, if a position becomes available before the expiration of the period, then that student can be transferred back to DAP, okay? And then it also says in another section of it, A2, it says if DAP is at capacity at the time of the campus coordinator decides placement, and those students engaged in a section 3707 that constitutes violent conduct, and then a student who's been placed in DAP for vaping, marijuana, e-cigarettes, alcohol, they can be removed from DAP and put in ISS to make the position DAP available for the students who engaged in violent conduct. And then, if removed from the program, if the student's removed from the program, then and a DAP position becomes available, then they can switch them back. And so there seems to be a lot of shifting and moving with the way that they've written this. And so I can understand how if the school district does in fact struggle, number one, with kids being in possession of marijuana, vapes, or alcohol, and if they have a small school district with a very small DAP, I can understand the concern, okay? Another thing about this is if a kid does get in trouble for this type of thing, that they have to complete a drug and an alcohol awareness program approved by TEA, and they have to do that within 30 days. Okay, let's talk real quick about another student bill. This is known as HB 567, is known as the Crown Act. And what this does is it prohibits any student dress code. Okay, it prohibits your district's dress code or grooming policy that's adopted by the school to include a student dress policy for any extracurricular activity, from discriminating against hair texture or protective hairstyle commonly associated with race. Okay, so in other words, you can't have policies that say, dress codes that say you can't wear braids or locks or twists or anything like that. If whatever you're trying to prohibit can be tied to race, we can't do it, okay? And this is not only a policy that's applicable to students, but the Crown Act is supposed to also protect employees from the same type of employee dress codes and grooming policies, okay? HB 4375 has to do with the requirement that students in middle school and high school, grades 7 through 12, must be instructed on how to use automated external defibrillators, AEDs, okay? I'm not sure exactly how that'll be incorporated, perhaps in health class or something, but that's going to be a requirement now, and that's effective immediately. I'm sorry about that. Let me go back. Okay. All right, so accountability, instruction, and library materials. Let's talk about a few bills regarding these subject areas. So HB 900 requires that the Texas State Library and Archives Commission develop standards for school library collection development with which school districts must comply. School library vendors must rate books and cannot provide materials to a school that are sexually explicit. Okay, and the bill also prohibits students from checking out sexually relevant materials without parental permission. And the law also makes it a requirement that these materials be reviewed every 2 years. So as to decide whether or not those materials should be at the schools.
How can they check one out if they're not?
HB
what now?
1416.
How do you check one out if they're not allowed to have one?
This is related to
Some schools still have
accelerated
them anyway.
instruction. If
That
you're,
makes sense.
as board members, you're probably going to know of or have heard of HB 4545. I promise you, your teachers and administrators know what HB 4545 is. That's a law that was passed the last legislative session in 2021, and it provided for what was commonly known as just a very difficult law with respect to students who did not pass their assessments, okay, their STAR assessments. What was required under HB 4545 was that any student who did not perform satisfactory on the test, on state assessments, was required to do 30 hours of accelerated instruction for every subject that they did not achieve satisfactory performance, okay? Your schools were scrambling to have tutors to provide this accelerated instruction. And again, that was a very, very difficult in practice. That was very difficult to carry out and provide all those students with accelerated instruction. The other thing that was difficult about it was that with the parent pushback, many parents, not only did they want to and try to opt out of taking having their student do the STAR exam, they also wanted to opt out of having their student do the required accelerated instruction, which was also just something that your schools have battled with for 2 years, okay? What HB 1416 does is it reduces the numbers of hours required for students who fail to achieve satisfactory performance to 15 hours. So it cuts it in half. Now, if the student performs significantly below satisfactory, then they will be required to do the 30 hours, but it's not a 30 hours across the board, okay? HB 1605 allows TEA to create an open resource instruction material program that districts may use. This also authorizes the State Board of Education to remove instructional material from the list if the state curriculum standards intended to be covered by the material are revised or materials revised without approval. And so if the State Board of Education intends to remove material from that list, they must provide to each district no later than December 1st of the year preceding the school year for which the revision will take place, with an updated list of approved instructional material. Okay, this particular bill provides a small allotment to some districts to use for state-created and approved material, $40 a student. And it prohibits, I think this is the point that really caused some concern. We'll see kind of how it plays out. But it prohibits districts from requiring teachers to spend time creating or selecting materials unless the contract specifies this duty. And so we'll see how that turns out in terms of teachers using the TEA created resource instructional material. And so it provides protections for teachers for disciplinary action related to the First Amendment if they use only materials approved on the SOB list, the State Board of Education list. All right, let's talk real quick about a couple of governance statutes here. HB 2892. This deals with a military service member being able to request that their student be transferred to another campus within the district or another district entirely. And so HB 2892 would require a school district to transfer a child of a military service member to another campus or another district upon their request to do so. Now, here's the catch with that. You may be thinking, well, to transfer to another campus, that's doable. Yes, it is. And so schools are certainly going to have to deal with that. Now, in terms of transferring to another school district, that's where it can get kind of difficult. And the law even says that requirement of transferring to another school district, that it's limited if the current district has a transfer agreement under Section 25035 to that transferring district. I want to point out that most school districts do not have such an agreement. It just doesn't exist. And the law doesn't require them to have such an agreement. And so I don't know how often schools will deal with this in terms of a military service member making a request to another school district, but if they do, it's the service member's likely going to run into a situation where the schools don't have that agreement, and so you can't, without that agreement, you can't force the neighboring school district to accept that student. Now, could they apply for a transfer like anyone else? Sure. And if the school wants to take them, then they can certainly do that. But in other words, it's not going to be able to be forced by this particular statute unless that agreement's in place. Okay, SB 29. This is relevant to all entities, right? To all schools and private businesses alike in the state of Texas, because of COVID was not. It's not that. It seems like forever ago, but it's not forever ago so much that we forgot. What we all had to go through in terms of mask mandates and vaccination mandates and all that kind of stuff. Well, SB 29 was a law that passed that prohibits a governmental entity from implementing, ordering, or otherwise imposing a mandate to prevent the spread of COVID-19 that requires a person to wear a mask or closure of private businesses or so forth. So basically what that says is that a governmental entity, whether it's a school, a city, none of those governmental entities is able to impose these mandates, okay? Now, that probably doesn't prohibit the governor from creating some kind of a mandate, but it's going to disallow cities and school districts and other entities from doing that. All right, let's talk real quick about HB 3033. This is one of those laws that is really a big deal because of what it means for your school district staff that deals with Public Information Acts. Okay, Public Information Acts requests are something that is allowed by law. I mean, the Public Information Act is one of the laws in Texas that promotes transparency and that allows the public to be able to access documents that are created or received by the government in the course of business, right? Generally, that's a good thing. This particular bill, what it does is it addresses something that has never been defined in the law in terms of Public Information Act. And that's the term of business day, okay? Before this law, the term business day was universally, it was defined as it would be defined in the dictionary, which means essentially if your business, if your entity is open for business that day, then it's a business day. If it's not, then it's not. And so the way that the Attorney General has interpreted that for school districts is that, if you're closed for 2 weeks at your Christmas holiday, then you're not open for business those 2 weeks, and that those days do not count as business days. Well, to make a long story short, there was a case that took place in Austin in 2022 that kind of muddied the waters because it essentially said, no, that's not the right interpretation of business day. It doesn't matter if you're closed for business or not, unless it's a Saturday, Sunday, or a holiday. We think it's a business day, and you may be asking, well, why do we care about this? Well, the reason that we care, and the reason that this is important, is when your school district receives requests for public information, there are very important, very strict timelines and deadlines that they're governed by, and that they have to respond to people within a certain time frame, or else bad things could start happening. And let's say that somebody makes a request for information that is confidential, okay? Like emails between the school and their attorney, or a personnel file that has evaluations of your teachers and things of that nature. Well, in order to withhold those documents from the public, the school district has to submit a request for an attorney general's opinion to the attorney general, and they have to do that within 10 business days of having received it. And so the term business days becomes a big deal when we're talking about the school being closed and being gone on whether it's spring break or Christmas or Thanksgiving, because before, again, if the school received an open records request on December 26th, for example, they didn't have to worry about that until they got back from their holiday break, okay? Now that's not the case. Now business day is defined under the Public Information Act as any day other than a Saturday or Sunday or a national or state holiday, okay? Now, there on the screen is kind of a glimpse of what are those, Texas and federal holidays, okay? There you can see, okay, what those are. Now, in addition, it says that, a business day is not an optional holiday, such as Good Friday, and it's not the Friday before or Monday after a national or state holiday if the holiday occurs on a Saturday or Sunday, such as July the 4th or something like that, okay? Now, this is the important thing. This is why we're spending so much time on this, because this is where you, board members, come into play. Even though that case that I mentioned before and this law kind of puts governmental entities, especially school districts, in a predicament, this is why this is what makes this important in terms of spending so much time talking about this, is because while the law defines business day, it also provides that your school may designate days that their entity is closed, okay? And so the law says that it may designate not more than 10 non-business days each calendar year. And so, and it specifically states that for school districts, that it's the Board of Trustees that must make this designation. And so the way that we see or advise that this designation be made is through a board resolution. And because it says per calendar year, you're going to have to do this for 2023 and 2024 and so on and so on, okay? If this is that, you may be thinking, okay, yeah, we did this. And so if you have not done that, creating this or passing this board resolution to designate non-business days, if that doesn't ring a bell to you, and if your school has not done that, that's something to ask about or talk to your superintendent about, because again, like I said, I just believe it's very, very important when, in terms of responding to requests for information.
Like it's fluid with us, I guess.
Another reason it's important is because, if we fail to respond to a request for information, if we don't comply with it, Well, then now there's a new requirement that you guys are going to have to do training in public information in the Public Information Act, and so that's you're going to have to do that training not later than 60 days after receipt of a notice. If somebody says, hey, they're not responding to my request for information, and so that's a new law that's come into effect now. What's not a new law is the fact that if you do not provide public information to a requester of information, that's a criminal offense, or it could be a criminal offense. So this is really important stuff, okay? There's also a new way to submit requests for Attorney General opinion. There's a new electronic filing system that's there, and that applies to certain entities as well. There's also a requirement after your school submits a request for an Attorney General opinion, they're going to receive a decision from the Attorney General, an open records ruling, and there's some law. So HB 3033 talks about what steps that schools are supposed to do within 30 days after receiving that. Okay, real quick, let's talk about some finance bills. HB 1 is your general appropriations bill. Okay, this was the one that talks about the state budget, which called for about $33 billion in general revenue, $63.5 billion in all funds for public education under TEA for the 2024-25 biennium. That's down $41 billion in general revenue and $64.5 billion in all funds appropriated in SB 1 during the 2022-23 biennium. Okay, $9.32 billion if that is in recapture payments from local school districts compared to $5.65 billion anticipated in Senate Bill 1 last biennium. Okay, and like we've said a few times, there's no legislation thus far that would have enacted funding teacher compensation increases. Now, again, we'll see what that session, that special education session, we'll see what it does in October, if anything. But as of yet, there were no general appropriations for funding teacher compensation increases. Every school, SB 838, makes it a requirement that every school provides silent panic alert technology. This does not mean that classrooms that have access to telephones or other electronic devices will work. That does not work, okay? The silent panic alert technology are systems. I know of a few systems that work that way, and some school districts around our area have those in place where it's simply a card or something that can go around your neck, like a badge or something like that, where school employees can alert just by pressing a button. They can alert the presence of some type of emergency, and it's a silent panic alert technology. And so this law provides that in order to comply with this section, that the schools may use funds provided to the district for through the school safety allotment or other available funds, okay? And they are also to use their customary procurement process. And so that may be one that your superintendent is talking to you about, SB 383, regarding the silent panic alert technology. All right, and last but not least, as I mentioned, this legislative session so far has been very heavy with respect to safety and security. One of those bills, the school safety bill, is HB 3. This was one of those that required, it includes, and it does a lot more than this. And again, if you're interested in seeing everything, regarding HB3, then I encourage you to look up that bill like I showed you a moment ago, and you can read the entire bill, okay? But what this does, it includes the requirement that districts have at least one armed security officer per campus, okay? Yes, you heard that right. It requires that school districts, every school district, every campus in the state of Texas, generally speaking under this law, is required to have at least one armed security officer per campus, one cop at every campus. Now, if that seems like an almost impossible, if not extremely difficult proposition, it's probably because it is, and so much so that within the language of the law, there is an exception that's put in there, and so that a school district may claim a good cause exception due to the lack of funding or available personnel. And really, it's that latter one. Yes, that sounds very, very expensive, but really, it's the lack of personnel in terms of the school district's ability. If your school district has, let's say, 5 campuses, the general requirement of the bill would mean that you have to hire 5 cops or more to be at each school. And you say, well, what do you mean more, Ron, if we have 5 campuses? Well, it's because the language of the law says that you have to have one armed security personnel per campus at all times. And so cops, security personnel get sick, they have to take days off, they gotta, go on vacation and so forth and so on. And so your campus can't be without one of these people. And so that's why, it would have to be more than the number of campuses that you have. And so really, again, that available personnel is the main reason that schools are likely not going to be able to comply with this. And so they're able to claim that good cause exception. Well, what does that mean? Okay, well, if you think about many of the types of exceptions or waivers or whatnot that your school might submit to TEA or some other entity, those are just, you're filling out a form and you're saying, here's why we need a waiver to this rule or to this requirement. This is not that. This is not a request for a waiver where you say, hey, TEA or Texas government, we're not able to fund this, or we don't have the personnel, so we're asking for an exception and for this requirement to be waived. That's not what's happening here. This is a claim of a good cause exception, but what must be provided is an alternative standard. And so in other words, you have to say, well, I can't have a cop at every one of my campus, but here's what I can have as an alternative. And those alternatives can include a school marshal or some other armed staff member. And what that other armed staff member means is a guardian plan. And now, if you have a guardian plan, if your district's already established that, you know exactly what that means and what I'm talking about. If you do not have a guardian plan, then it might be time to talk about that, because that may be what's needed in order to help your school comply with HB3 if you cannot hire an armed security officer per campus. And so that's kind of a process where if you're going to have something like a guardian plan or a school marshal program at your school, and that's your alternative standard, then what you also need is your school board's going to need to pass a resolution where it is declaring its good cause exception, or claiming its good cause exception, and then it's articulating what its alternative standard is. And so you might have already done that as well. Okay, you might be saying, "Oh, Ron, we did that in September, or we did it in August." Okay, great, that's great. If that doesn't ring a bell to you, that's another one to ask about. Okay, because it's very, very important to get that done. That already went into effect in September 1st. So if you haven't done that, you need to do that as soon as possible.
We are at
This bill
5
does
now.
increase the school safety allotment by 28 cents per student, which I believe that brings to like $10 per student. The bill also provides for a $15,000 per campus allotment to implement safety measures. It requires most staff to complete mental health training, and it requires education service centers to serve as school safety resources for districts. Let's talk real quick about HB 1905. HB 1905 allows the school district to provide school safety training courses, including certain active shooter training courses available at no cost to the employees of school districts within Texas. Okay, a lot of schools have already been doing this for their employees. Most of those schools have guardian programs, which is why they're doing that. But some who do not have one or still want to do this is something that allows for that as well. This is one of the issues. HB 2484 addresses an unfortunate reality that we've seen increase over the years, and that is spectators at UIL competitions engaging in violent conduct towards officials. And so this HB 2484 prohibits a spectator of a UIL competition from attending any future extracurricular activity sponsored by the school district or UIL if that spectator engaged in violent conduct that caused bodily injury to a person serving as a sports official in retaliation for or as a result of the person's actions while performing their duties. So this is, if some parent or somebody else gets physical with an official, they're going to have problems in terms of being able to have people or have that person, that spectator, remain there, and they're going to be ejected and not. They're going to be prohibited from attending those or any future extracurricular activities. That prohibition imposed must be for anywhere between 1 to 5 years, and so they need to pay mind to that. SB 1720. This particular bill allows school employees who report a potential threat to the school's threat assessment team to keep their name confidential. Okay, and so whereas one of the first bills that we talked about today, schools or employees making a report to CPS, it's not anonymous anymore, and they have to release their information, or their information has to be presented to CPS. Okay, this one's different in that it allows school employees to keep their identities confidential, and it specifically states that a district employee who reports the potential threat to a team may elect for their identity to be confidential and not subject to a Public Information Act request. And so that gives them the ability to exclude that from any requested information or documentation. And so, as I mentioned before, I think we were trying to keep this presentation at about an hour or so. And so, as I mentioned before, there are many more bills that were passed and that may still be passed in the special session in October. However, we just wanted to give you guys a great overview of some of the more notable and important bills that were that were passed that affect your school districts and that your administrators are going to have to be navigating through and dealing with for the next couple of years or longer than that. And so I want to thank you all for your attention to this video. Again, I want to thank the Service Center and Wayne Blunt and Dr. Wargo for providing this avenue for you guys to be able to receive this training. And that is all that I have for today. I appreciate y'all's attendance, and I look forward to the next time.
I'm going to cue the next one up for those that need to stay. A lot of that should have at least rung some sort of bell. Some of it doesn't apply to us. We are one of the lucky districts that have been able to find SROs. I don't know how I feel about the Guardian program. I've asked Ron a few times because I know Seagraves does it. I think you have mixed feelings about it too with your own wife. I don't think we're there yet. I think if the day comes where we can't find SROs, we might have to start having that conversation. But I don't think we're there right now. The safety stuff has been steadily working on. We're ahead of the game in a lot of spots. The one place we've been behind the game is on the silent button technology that he talked about. We do have it on our cell. Everybody does have it on cell phones. But on the next safety grant, that's what we're, with the safety committee, we're going to see what it would cost to do that. And it's typical stuff. They pass a lot of stuff, but they don't tell you how to pay for it because some of this stuff is pricey. And not only do they not tell you how to pay for it, they give you less money anyway. But these grants do help a little bit in trying to navigate some of those things. Do I have any questions over any of that stuff, General?
Going back to the library one, books. One of them said that it was prohibited for a district to have sexually explicit
Right.
books. Then the next one was it was prohibited from checking them out.
And I think it's a catch. It's a catch because what I see in the news usually are libraries that still have the books. Does that make sense? Right. They just never went in and cleared them out. And then they are able to be checked out. And they put out a list pretty recently that you can look through because it's kind of subjective when you think about it. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, if you think about some of the stuff that is natural to read could be construed as sexual. So they finally have put out a list of books that the state considers that, and we just make sure we don't have any of those in our library. Y'all ready to get round 2 started? Those y'all don't have those that can leave. I would jet. Thank y'all very much.
Can you just leave this here?
Yes, ma'am. If you'll leave it, I'll come by and scoop them up here in a little bit.